When you think about pumping, what are your immediate associations? Do you have positive or negative feelings about pumping? My guest today is someone who has inspired me to check my own pumping biases after I began following her on Instagram. I hope after listening today that you will feel inspired to do the same. Enjoy my interview with Dianna of Pump with Purpose, a mom of two, an exclusive pumper by necessity at first and then by choice, and a woman who is building a pumping empowerment empire. Be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who is pumping and could use some encouragement. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are. Hi, Dianna. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so happy to be here today.
I'm fangirling a little bit because I've been following you on Insta for a while, and you have made such an impact teaching both pumping people and lactation professionals like myself.
Thank
And so
you.
I'm so glad to have you on.
Thank you. I just tell people I am one pumping mom, helping one pumping family at a time. Just a mom trying to change the world, helping one pumping family at a time.
Doing it.
Yes.
You're making your mark.
That's my goal. When my time is done here, I will want to have made a mark on the world. That's my goal. Globally, all across the world. That's my goal.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, you are making a mark professionally, but you're here to share your personal stories. I don't know how often you do that as a professional now.
Not often. So if people attend my lives, then yes, I've told my story, or if they're in my stories, every once in a while I'll sprinkle it in. But my focus in my practice is more about helping other people to get their journey correct. So I don't often share about mine except on special occasions.
Right. Yeah. Because when you become a lactation professional, it really isn't about us because we are one person and we have one story. But that's not, there are millions of people who are feeding babies human milk. And it's not about what our one experience was. And if it was, then that person could just go to their friend and ask their one friend what their one experience was.
Yeah. I wish more people realized that, but they don't. So I'm just trying to really focus on taking the personal out of it and really helping people realize it's about them and their body. But I tell people all the time, I don't go up against social media. People get their information in the spaces and places that work best for them. But people here know that I give accurate quality information, but if that's not their jam, then they're more than welcome to listen. I tell people all the time, I'm always going to be here. You're stuck with me. I'll be there when they need me and when they need professional care. But I do love my personal story because it feeds into everything that Pump with Purpose stands for.
I'm going to take you back to the years before you even had a baby and have you think about what your exposure to body feeding, breastfeeding, pumping was before it was your turn.
So it was a zero. I'm not going to say zero. So in my family, my grandmother breastfed all 5 of her children at the breast. Her last one, she would tell me she was just so stressed out that it just didn't work well for her at the last of the 5 children. She also had her 5th child, like her first child, she started at 18 and then the youngest is 20 years old. There's a 20-year age gap between the two. So she probably doesn't realize that having a child that 18 versus 40 basically is just a different thing on the lactation space as we get older. And then just stresses of having 5 children, 4 other children, and then a 5th probably played a factor in her breast milk. But back then they just didn't know. So my grandmother breastfed, but none of her children and none of so my two uncles, and then I have my mom and her two sisters, the wives didn't breastfeed of my uncle's children. And then none of her children or her daughter-in-laws breastfed their children at all. And so then you leave the grandchildren that were next. My older cousin, his wife did breastfeed by nursing. And she may have pumped when she went back to work, but I was busy having fun back then. So I didn't really pay much attention to what was going on. So when I finally had children, most of the people in my family thought I would never have children. I corporate career climbed first. My husband and I, we started later. We didn't have children in our 20s at all. I corporate climbed. High stress, high demanding field for both of us. So there was no focus on having children. And definitely, I had friends that started having children before me. My godson, she breastfed by nursing and pumping as needed. So it was in my life. I had some friends that did it, but it wasn't a focus. It wasn't even something I thought about. And so then we decided it was time to have children. And some people don't snap their fingers to have children. So I just encourage people out here, just know that regardless if you snap your fingers or not, it doesn't play a factor in your success at breastfeeding or not, but just getting the education. So I took a CPR class when I was pregnant, but never any breastfeeding assistance whatsoever. And so I just focused on having children. When it was time for us to have children, I had my pregnancy, but no information. I didn't even search for breastfeeding information. I just was like, I'm going to nurse. It's going to be great. Boy, was I wrong. So no big exposure. None of my family was encouraging or discouraging of it in any way. But again, once I get into my story, I breastfed my first son for 9 months with 3,000 ounces saved in the freezers because I knew I wanted to have 2 deep freezers full of milk because I knew I wanted to start my breastfeeding journey on the first one early. So I planned for that. And so I just encourage people, once they know that they want to breastfeed, that they realize what they want to do to reach their goal. So then on my second breastfeeding, over 3 years, pumping for both children, my baby and my toddler as well. So I tandem pump. So of course, no one in my family expected me to be able to pump for 3 years, let alone my granny, God rest her soul. She told me, she was like, you took the easy way out. Like, Granny, really? The easy way out? Yes, you took the easy way out. So I laugh at her because it was easier for me, but I don't think it was the easier way out. But everyone has their opinion on nursing and pumping and what's successful, what not successful looks like. And that's the reason I'm here today, because only success to me is defined by each and every person. Success for me was to be able to provide both of my children with breast milk as long as my body would provide it. My first one, I knew I wanted to have another one, but my second one, I felt mom guilt. And so I ended early. He had frozen breast milk for a year, but not freshly from my body. And so for that, I was like, I want to go as long as I want to be able to provide that for both of them. So it's not normalized. Long-term pumping is not normalized whatsoever. People don't even realize that they can even pump longer than a year. They think that just because their clock strikes 1, that means that they should just switch to something else. Nothing else in this world is tailored perfectly for our children other than breast milk. So I don't care how people want to pump, because sometimes after one with nursing, your body determines it, your baby determines it. But with pumping, nothing else determines it but your body and that pump. And it was a very important factor for me that so many people told me I wouldn't be successful. You have no idea how many doctors and pediatricians, and because pumping isn't normalized, and how many friends told me, are you sure you don't want to nurse again? You sure you don't want, I'm pumping 50 ounces a day. It's like, no, I'm good. But it took me a while to be confident and bold in my stance on my journey. And I'm on the other end of it now. So I always tell people to find your voice so you can find your peace. You will find so much peace on the other end when people know that you boldly and strongly stand for what you believe in. So I'll get into the story on like how I got here, but I'm on the other end of it now. So no one on social media or any platform in this world will not let me quiet my voice that pumping is long-term, pumping is sustainable, and pumping is a viable solution.
Okay. I want to get back to the comment that your grandma said about taking the easy way out, because first of all, don't we want mothering to feel easy?
I know, but people have their personal
Right.
preferences. Even now, I see my community, they'll send me a message that some other community said pumping is not breastfeeding. And I tell them, those are not your spaces and places. You have to figure out what works best for you. I know that people have their biases, and I'm like, then that's not your space. I don't police social media. I don't police people and their
Right.
viewpoint. I provide people with a safe space and place to put pumping on the pedestal that it deserves. But yes, along with my grandmother, there are people in this world that feel like pumping is it. I can't believe she said it was easy. They say the opposite, but there
Right.
are people that just feel like pumping is less than, pumping is just like whatever.
And it's funny because most people, including myself, have always thought that pumping, people who have done both typically say that it's harder, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do, but
Yeah.
I find so many people now that I give them an outlet to realize it, pumping is much easier for a lot of people once they
Yeah.
have a way to figure out how to make it easier. People are out
Right.
here making pumping harder than what it needs to be.
Mhm.
I actually believe that I am more efficient. I mean, it's about personal preference, but I
Right.
definitely pumped and washed bottles a lot less than people nursed. Because no, I wasn't nursing a baby every hour to hour and a half for 30 to 45 minutes if things are going wrong. I'm efficient and I got a full 3 hour stretch. And then after 3 months, I was dropping pumps. And by the time I was at 9 months, I was pumping 4 times a day and I was making a lot of milk. When you realize that pumping can be a marathon and not a sprint, you can get out a lot more and make your journey a lot easier when you're going back to work. People around you will know that that is an important thing for you to do and it can be amazing.
And it's also highly individual, depending on each person's
Correct.
milk making ability, each person's hormonal
Correct.
response to both a baby and a pump and their
Mhm.
hand. So
Correct.
it's going to be highly.
It is. It is, but
Yeah.
helping people to figure out what works best for them.
Are you pregnant or a new parent looking to ensure a better postpartum experience? Or are you a birth worker looking to improve your postpartum care skills? Check out Thriving After Birth, an online self-paced course by me, midwife and educator Tanya Tringali. It's 10 and a half hours of video content featuring experts in lactation, mental health, pelvic floor health, pediatric sleep issues. You also get worksheets and a workbook, as well as options to have a one-on-one session with me. Sign up at motherwitmaternity.com/thriving, and let's improve postpartum care together.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're this strong, bold, confident person when it comes to pumping now
Nope.
on this
I
end. But let's
exactly.
take you back to when you were making these decisions
Yeah.
and you were thinking, you said you didn't do any preparation at all for baby feeding on the front end. Were you asked at all by your care providers about how you were going to feed your baby? Were you given a breast exam?
Nothing.
Okay.
Even so much that at the doctor visit that they do the glucose testing, I was given formula packets of fill out this for your formula, fill out that to have it get some samples in. I was never asked or told what my preference was. And so with my first journey, I didn't even know. So I got to the hospital after amazing pregnancy, 39 weeks and 4 days, and get to the hospital. Contractions are 3 centimeters apart. They're coming every minute. I live in Northern Virginia trying to get to the hospital in 6 a.m. traffic because overnight, like I was laboring, but not knowing that I was laboring because I went to Braxton Hicks and I was going back and forth. And like, just stayed there until they are 5 minutes apart. Boy, that was dumb because not did I realize that 3 and 2 minutes can come really quickly. So I'm in
Mm.
the car laboring. We get to the hospital. Epidural was my friend. People can choose what works best for them. But when I got there, oh, any decision not to give me this epidural right now. So get the epidural. I'm on the table laboring. Contractions are less than 5 minutes apart. They go in. I'm 3 centimeters dilated. But then everything starts to slow down after you get the epidural. And Then they decided to give me Pitocin. My son's heart rate could not handle it. It kept dropping below where it needed to be. They said, if the heart rate keeps dropping 3 times, you're out. We're going to do emergency C-section. So of course, my little one, 3 times, I was out really quickly. Within 4 or 5 hours, heart rate kept dropping. Became unsafe for me to deliver. Also, they told me my pelvic bone was something weird and I was going to rip open and episiotomy was going to be at play. And I was just like, no, if you're going to ruin both of them, let's just ruin my stomach at this point. Don't have me trying and get halfway through and I got to end up at the table after both are not intact. We went in emergency C-section when they broke my water. They realized that my son had pooped in the sac. So then they said also became unsafe in a way to deliver vaginally because if he inhaled it. So of course they went to emergency C-section. Everything was perfect until they got him out. Of course, he still inhaled the meconium before they could suck it out. Yet level 3 meconium covered in poop. I didn't get to see it because I had a blue cover in front of me, but my husband saw it. So his lungs collapsed at birth. He had to be resuscitated. The NICU room, luckily in the best NICU hospitals in Northern Virginia, it went from 3 or 4 people in the room to a team of 20 in the room. Literally, husband is in tears. I'm at the table, don't know what's going on. I just see all these people rushing in. My mom is waiting on the door, but she could see like all of a sudden people just start. Can you imagine your child is in the operating room? And I'm her firstborn child as well, first daughter. And she just sees all these people rushing in. No one will answer her at all on what is going on. And so they rush in, they resuscitate my son. He has to be immediately whisked off. I told my husband, just go see about the baby. So I'm in the operating room getting sewn back up, not knowing anything at this point. But eventually I heard that cry. I heard the cry. So I knew overall everything was going to be okay, but I heard the cry. So I was like, okay, I didn't hear the cry initially, but I heard the cry. And so they took him all out and got everything out and cleared and everything. And so C-section was the best thing that ever happened to me. Some people regret theirs. I knew I may not have a baby on the other end if I didn't have a C-section. So they whisked him off to the NICU. I'm in the room. They sewed me back up. I didn't see my husband for a little bit, but by that time, my mom is no joke. I get it from my mom. So I'm my mother's child. So by this time, she finds a doctor the doctor's going to let her back to see me, not supposed to let her back to see me. So she got back there. They wouldn't tell her anything. So I let her know what happened. And so they let her back for a few minutes just so ease her nerves because you don't want to make my mom upset. So she finds where she needs to go. She's sweet enough but nasty enough at the same time. I need to see my daughter. I need to see my daughter. So she gets back there with me. My husband comes back in the meantime, giving us updates. My son is fine. Everyone's like, you are so blessed. They cleared his lung path. There was no poop still in the lungs. My doctor, the pediatrician, when I took him a little bit later, she was like, you are blessed. She said, you are blessed. And I know who I am and whose I am always. And my little one is fine. He pulled through, but we were separated at birth. No one told me to hand express. No one told me to stimulate my nipple. Get to the room still without my little one. We were separated for a few days. Pump was there. No one told me how to use it. They just handed me a kit and I just started pressing buttons. That's what we do. I knew I wanted to pump. I didn't do it as much as I should have at first. I was so worried and got people coming in every 5 minutes, room with people in it. And by this time, my mom was able to be in the room with me as well. Husband going back and forth. I'm sewn up with pain and refused to take any drugs more than Tylenol and Motrin mix every 4 hours or whatever it is. I refused to take anything else because I knew I wanted to provide breast milk. So I'm suffering through pain. Still, the NICU is 5 NICU wards in Fairfax Hospital. So I'm like having to go out of the maternity ward. First few times I was being wheeled down to see my little one in a wheelchair. I was a mess. He was fine. He was on just oxygen regulation. He was given formula at birth, but no issues. He had to be just to make sure that the NICU standards and regular maternity standards are different. So they had to make sure his blood sugar stayed regulated, all the things. And I wasn't producing anything at that point. No colostrum actively coming out. No one focused on that, which we didn't need to. It was a situation for let's make sure baby and me go home on time together. So my whole mindset changed. It was like, do what you have to do to make sure my little one's okay. I'll figure out the rest with the pump. So I get back to the room. I'm in pain, still going back and forth, but I had to do what I had to do. And that's what we do as moms. We have to do what we have to do. So I'm in a lot of pain. Eventually I stopped focusing on being in a room. I'm trying to be in there, letting longer than 4 hours go away. And then it buckled down. I'm in so much pain. They're like, listen, I don't care what you do, but you got to come back to this room every 4 hours to make sure you get your medication in. I'm down there at 1 o'clock in the morning instead of pumping. I'm in the room. Eventually, my colostrum transition, I stayed in the hospital for 5 days the first time, only because my little one came to the room with us around day 2.5, 3. So he did fully recover, come back into the maternity ward unit of like their standards and everything. Everything was amazing. I was trying to put baby at the breast, not knowing later that he was tongue tied and lip tied. So I'm trying to nurse and trying to pump. And I remember day 4, almost day 5, I'm about to go home and I'm doing my last pump with the Amida Platinum at the hospital. And my milk transitions to mature milk. I still remember that moment. I still remember the tears that were shed of my body's doing what it's supposed to do. Because for the first 3 days, I didn't see anything. I'm using the pump and not seeing anything. No one's telling me to hand express. No one's telling me to use a manual pump. No one's telling me to do anything. So when it finally transitions in and I saw like real, it's always been milk, but with the milk actually dropping into the bottle and filling up the little medulla. Oh, that moment of it's working. All this hard work of pumping around the clock when I can is working. So I go home and at that moment, I'm like, well, I can't use a regular pump. I went to the hospital, rented in Fairfax, they use Amida pumps. And I got the Amida, I rented it out. And I'm like, I'm using this thing because milk is coming out of this thing. No one told me anything. And so I'm using it and milk is coming and I'm still like trying to nurse. And so then I hired lactation professionals to come to the house to visit and do the weighted feeds. And by this time, I'm getting even more milk. And then we discovered officially that he was tongue-tied, but I didn't know what tongue-tied meant. No one explained that to me. I was like, oh, if that means that I just can't nurse, then that's fine. I'm just going to pump. But not until I started doing the research and having someone to come in and be like, listen, there are things that happen. There are speech issues. There are academic issues. There are oral issues. There are so many things that happen with tongue-tied babies. So immediately I'm finding the best doctors in Northern Virginia to be able to release my baby's tongue tie because I'm pumping fine, but I just didn't know about all the things. And so we got the tongue tie release around 6 weeks, biggest regret. Fast forward, I'll go back. Second son, I had tongue tie, lip tie, buckle tie released at 2 weeks on my birthday because I now know the importance of getting things done timely, even if I decide not to nurse at all. But I got it done at 6 weeks. At that moment, let me tell you, when we released that tongue tie, and we didn't realize how my son, I don't even know the severity, but it was a severe tongue tie to the point he never licked his tongue out of his mouth. His tongue was tied to the bottom, like all the way up where the gums were. The tie was all the way there. And that moment when we came back in the room after it was released, and I could see my son licking his tongue out for the first time, like a little snake. I'm crying. You go through so many emotions and mom guilt and thinking you're supposed to know everything and you don't. And so I had an amazing person that released. She was an IVCLC. Now she's an IVCLC, but at the time she was an exclusive pumper. I did nurse after the tongue tie was released, but I was on the exclusive pumping journey without realizing I was on the exclusive pumping journey. I started meeting more exclusive pumpers that actually admit that they're exclusive pumpers. People out here don't admit that they pumping only or formula feeding only. And then you think the US is bad. Other countries, they can't even find people to even tell them what to do.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that people don't want to say that they're...
Because lactation professionals all across the world do not support pumping and doing anything other than nursing. You should see the people that pull up that they aren't even told how to use a pump. They just say, go pick this pump, go pick these settings. Oh, that flame size looks okay. So when I see the people, I'm like, just pass them to pumping, someone that actually cares about pumping enough to not just make it secondhand information and how to pick a pump. They're just throwing out pumps on the internet. No one is like, what is your body like? What do you need? What do you want? What feels good to you? It's really sad.
Hear ye, lactation supporters across the land, whatever your designation is, IBCLC, CLC, breastfeeding counselor, peer supporter, whatever it might be, I implore you to take this to heart. It doesn't matter what our intentions are. It matters how our words and actions are being perceived. And I have heard hundreds of people at this point, and Dianna has close to 70,000 followers on Instagram, so many of which did not get the attention they needed from lactation professionals to feel successful with pumping. I read a study recently that showed that hospital staff, both doctors and nurses, brought their own experience and bias with breastfeeding into the postpartum units when counseling patients about breastfeeding. If they had positive associations with breastfeeding, they were encouraging to patients. If they had negative experiences personally, they brought a negative bias and did not encourage human milk feeding and often discouraged it. Let's not bring any biases we have with pumping based on our own personal experiences. Let's listen to what people are saying they need and want and provide them the care they are asking for. And if you aren't willing or able to do that, refer these people to someone who is passionate about pumping. Please.
But I want to implore to anyone here not to make the mistake that I did. It is not the hospital's job to provide us with lactation care before we get there. My clients that pull up prenatally, they have already their plans decided, so I don't care what's in the hospital. I don't leave it to chance to figuring that out. And that's where lactation professionals, no matter what, we need to normalize prenatal care so families go there prepared no matter what happens, because you don't know. You're going to be nursing. You don't know how the latch is going to be. You don't know what you're going to be doing. And so normalizing getting care, space in a place that works well for you. Let's also be clear and honest that even after 5 days, or if that's the longest, nowadays it's 2 or 3, the hospital staff isn't going to be there. They're not going to be there when you're in the middle of the night or the next day when you're like, oh my gosh, I got a clogged up. You can't go back to that. You can go back to there's a unit at the hospital with lactation professionals, but we have to normalize getting care outside of the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some engulfed in the pediatrician's office. My pediatrician's office had a lactation professional there, but it was still how it goes. When you're there, everyone can get baby to latch and do what it's supposed to do. But then when you get home, no one is like really showing you, or hands off. Like now the standard, from what I understand, is like more hands off, trying to let moms do it. So then when they are home by themselves, they can replicate it. And that's why the beautiful thing about pumping is when people are like, you don't see people in person. I'm like, no, because I don't want to touch you. I don't want to show you this and that and pick, like, you're going to do it yourself. You're going to remember what to do, how to do it. It's just to normalize, like, we have to put our care in our hands the entire time. That's just one thing that I've learned. I didn't do that the first time around, or the second time I winged it as well.
So, because you had to experience this. You became who you are because you learned how to be an exclusive pumper on your own.
Correct.
And now you're helping other people become exclusive pumpers and get the support they need. You experiencing any pain or anything with nursing?
Oh, yeah. My son was frustrated. I'm frustrated. Everybody's crying. And it was a nightmare. So I'm the type, I'm not going to go through pain. I don't care if it's to nurse or not. Like, I'm like this. I always was the impression. I tell my clients all the time, I want those to look like before what they look like afterwards. When it was not working, it was some chomping and things were just looking tore up. I was like, no and no. So for me, I didn't, but I see so many moms, they suffer through the pain, the hurting for the sake of nursing or for the sake of pumping in the wrong sides. And I'm like, no, when you are in so much pain, it shuts down your body can't respond in pain in the same way. So for me, once I was in pain, it was a no for me. So then I found products which are different for each and every journey. Because back then, for almost 5 years ago, there wasn't all the great products that could be on the market now. But now the market is becoming so oversaturated. Not too bad, but like you get 6 and 8 products. And who wants to try all of those all the time to figure out? And then if you don't know how to use the pump right, so even if you get the product that may be best, you think it doesn't work because you don't have a good pump that's emptying out your breast. It's just a never-ending cycle of holistic care. But I literally trial and error. But for me, think since we had children so late in life, and the people think the 60 pumps in here, I purchased a lot of them myself. I was like, I'm going to keep trying all this stuff to figure out what works best. No one has the endless funds. I don't even want my clients to do that. They're like, I got 5 or 6 pumps. That's too many. Unless you're going to become a breast pump, you're going to focus on breast pumping later. You don't need 10 pumps. You don't need 15 pumps. And so I just kept buying. I'm like, I got to try this. I got to try that. All at the sake of trying to figure out what works best. So I am self-taught. I have a bunch of pumps. I study the intricate details of pump. I'm very in tune with my body. I also help people become in tune with their body because so many people just want to press buttons and not tie things together, or they see things happening, but then they're not like, oh, this means my body likes this. No, they just start finding people on the internet telling them to do stuff. And then their mom groups and their this group and that group. And then it just creates more confusion because if people think that increasing milk supply just shoom like a rocket, not realizing it's gradual. And so they stop here, not realizing they got to keep going. And I'm okay if we as the pumping community and people that support pumping need to lead the pumping community along the way until the education and these other sources that provide lactation education pick up on the importance. Because when I did my CLC, there was like a little bit of information and it was so lackluster. Pumping is second hand and it comes through. And then when you're hearing that, and then they're breeding people out of it to do it. And then people pumping, we just do it. And not, I wanted to be taken serious because pumping is more than pumping. You still got to understand milk supply. You still got to understand lactogenesis and the phases and all the things. And like, you just then can't just fly by the night and do it like for your journey. Cause so many people like, oh, I'm on the journey. So it's fun right now. Let me just start showing milk pouring and not knowing that it's not the case for everyone. I know that there will be plenty of people not able to make 50, 55 ounces a day like I did, but they can make work to figure out their body to make what their body makes and not put your journey on it so much. Like I truly just want to help women pull up to that pump with the confidence when they go back to work. Or I went back to work both journeys at 4 months and I dropped my baby off and I just had to go to work and figure out pumping. And luckily I was in a supportive environment that most of the time when I put a meeting block on my calendar, they adhere to it. But please believe there's so many occupations that don't allow for that.
Oh, yeah.
Pump back what? It doesn't matter. And I tell my clients all the time, I can't take care of you. So I need to help you figure out how to pump around where you're faced with right now. And there's a law act of something. And then there's the realistic aspect of
Right.
something. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
you figuring out how to go back to work and have those adult professional conversations with your employer of, I had those conversations. I need these times to pump. I need to make it work. And coworkers covered for me in meetings, or they did something while I was pumping, or I shut the door and locked the door, luckily, but not everybody has those. So like I tell people, like, just if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you are so different, food service, all those things are different versus sitting behind a desk all day, or can shut a door, or can lock a door, can watch videos of my children. I had those photo things that fly across. I put it beside my desk and I could look over and see my babies of all the pictures that I took when I was on maternity leave and have the letdowns that I was supposed to have and create the environment I was supposed to have. Not everybody's that lucky.
I always ask people when I'm counseling them about pumping, I'll say, okay, this is the law in your state.
Yeah.
Or are you able to have a discussion with your employer about the law? Does your employer adhere to the law?
Yes.
Because like you said, there's the law and then there's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a person works in a restaurant and yes, they know the law, and B, I'm not going to go to my manager and say, this is the law, because they don't care. They'll find somebody else.
Yeah.
And so for you, as you were navigating these situations, was it hard for you to like go back to work? Did you already have your milk supply fully established? Did you have your pump schedule worked out?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, I got myself on my work schedule. I didn't even know I just did it. I got myself, which is what I encourage other people to do. I got on my work schedule when I started my pumping journey. And then I took it a step further. I tell people, do what works best for you. I got my kids eating every 3 hours on my work schedule. So we were pumping and feeding at the same time from the same bottle around the clock, one bottle ahead. So when we went back to work, my kids were on the schedule. I was on my pumping schedule. I had to get up at 4:00 in the morning to get out of the house, get them to daycare, get on 2 trains to get into DC every single day. I had to start at 4 a.m. And I did it all while I was on maternity leave. I was already on my schedule. I told my job I need these times to pump. Did my second one on the train into work. So when I went to work, I did 10, 1, and 4 around the clock. And yes, I did a 4:30. I left at 5 o'clock. I didn't care if it was 30 minutes later. So I was on my schedule. And that's why I don't like people to pick schedules for people, because if you pick schedules for people, then that's may not be when they can work. If I say 1 o'clock every day and they can't, then that's not a schedule. So I was already on. I had all my pumps picked out. I didn't know anything better. So I bought an Amita Platinum, a whole hospital grade pump, to be able to be successful, because that's what they told me I needed to be successful when pumping. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I did not have to do that. I did not have to spend that kind of money. I did not have to log. So I bought 2 of them on my second journey. So I had one at home and one at work, just to be what I thought was successful. I believe in doing what I had to do to get the journey that I wanted. And that's what I encourage other people. No, I'm not saying that you need to go buy a $2,000 pump. I found a breastfeeding company that was closing, so I got it wholesale or whatever, but I got both of them from her. I did pay a discounted rate for it, but still, nobody needs to do that. I just didn't know any better. And I just was like, not everyone financially can do that as well. And that's why when you're doing things, you also need to consider financially as well what you can and cannot do. And that was, luckily, I didn't have that concern, but I don't want people to be out here buying that type of money just to think that ensures success. Like you can buy whatever you want and have the wrong flange size, or have an underlying condition present, or doing all the wrong things and not being on a schedule, or a schedule that works well for you, or emptying the breast output. There's just so many other factors that play, even when you have all what you think are the right factors, like the pump and the flange. Is so much more than that.
Yeah, you're right. And you had to figure out these little things.
All the things.
And you were pumping on the train?
Oh, yeah. On the train. Yes.
So, set that scene for us.
Yes. Pumping on the train. I pumped at fairs. I'm a big person of pumping on the way to and from, so I can enjoy myself when I get there. But if not, if I'm there for a while, I'm going to pull out the pump. The first time around definitely was much harder because wearables were not out then. And I know my platform were like, oh, I don't believe in a wearable as a primary, but a wearable got me through. I pumped at fairs. I pumped everywhere that I needed to go, on the train to and from work, pop them in, pump. But I knew when I got back home, I had to use a traditional pump now. I was not out here just randomly using a wearable all the time, but I was on the train. Do cover up. I'm not that type of person. Even with flanges, I pump with flanges on the train to and from work. I still covered up. I'm just not that type of person. I believe that people have a right to do what they want. But yes, on the way to work, on the way from work. So then when I got home to my children, I could enjoy it with them before their bedtime, to actually not have to pump again until 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. if I stretch it a little bit. I believe that we have to create circumstances to be able to get life done. And the encouragement of my 2 biggest fears when I was actively in the thick of it, was I was scared of mastitis, which I never got, even at 50 to 55 ounces that people tell you, oh, you're going to get mastitis. No. Number 2, I was scared my milk supply was just going to dry up, that I was just going to wake up the next day and my milk supply was going to go away. And I did not realize that as long as I still did what I was supposed to do, pump on a schedule, even if every time I may have slept a little bit too long or all the things, I knew exactly what to do to empty out my breast to be successful at the next time around. We have to stop being scared that milk supply can just go away, but something usually happens to have that to happen. I didn't know that. No one gave me that reassurance that as long as I still did what I was supposed to do. So I stressed over and over again until I became a lactation professional to really understand milk supply, because no one's explaining us to us milk supply.
No. And think about all of the times in your own journey where that ball was dropped. Like prenatally, no one asked you about it. You get to the hospital and like you have a baby, you have this like crazy C-section story with meconium in the lungs, you have a separation, there's a pump in your room. You have to learn how to use it. No one comes in and tells you that. Baby's in the NICU, you're pumping. No one comes to ask you if you need help learning during the days in the NICU. You get released from the hospital. No one's explaining milk supply. Pediatrician, I'm sure there were extra pediatrician visits because of the NICU baby. No one's explaining then. Finally, you get the tongue tie diagnosis. And you didn't even really know what that meant until 6 weeks later. And even then, no one's explaining about milk supply. There were a lot of balls dropped there.
Yeah.
And that is not just for you. This is a systemic failure. This is a systemic failure. And it happened again and again.
If you are hearing about all of these holes in the system, all of these places where the balls get dropped for families that want to feed human milk to their babies but don't receive the education and the support to be successful, and you want to be a change maker, join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. This is a place where perinatal supporters of various fields and parents are coming together in one space to discuss the gaps in care, where we are looking at data and research and discussing our own personal experiences and working to close the gaps. I'll see you there. And if you are someone who is personally experiencing these gaps right now and need help feeding your baby, no matter how you want that to turn out, I would love to be the person who provides empathetic support to you. You can find all of my information linked in the show notes or by going to www.quabbinbirthservices.com. Most likely, I can bill your insurance, or at the very least, I can provide a super bill for you to get reimbursed.
But I also put it back on me as well, because I'm so educated. Why didn't I do this as well for myself? No one owes me the right to tell me anything. I have to make it important and an advocacy for myself. And that's what I also arm people with, is to find their voice so they can find their peace. We cannot depend on everyone else to always tell us something. We have to go out and seek it in places and spaces that we find safe, that we trust. So it's also, it's all of us. We all have to do our duty and not just put it on the healthcare system. Like, if we can get that type of care, to do it and not just be like, I'm going to get in the hospital when I get there. Most of the time, right? Not.
I might say that you actually did do that for yourself, getting up to 50 ounces a day. And you mentioned never having gotten mastitis. So I would like to ask, what is the care that you did for yourself to ensure that?
I pumped on a schedule.
Okay,
I have
you
clients
just stuck
that make,
to your schedule.
Correct.
Okay.
I have clients that make 120 ounces a day. Never had mastitis. If they do get a clogged duct, it's from sleeping too long or something, but you on a schedule with the right pump, right flange, right pumping products to empty the breast out, and they're not all created equal, and the right schedule. I'm not saying everyone needs that kind of milk, but if they want it, I am supportive of helping them to get it. I had my freezer stash lasted 3 years. I rotated it. I'm very proud of it. I will not let anyone shame me or make me think, oh my gosh, if you tell these people how to make this milk. Now they do got to understand, you go making this kind of milk, you got to be able to maintain that kind of milk.
I
can't
know,
be
right?
like, oh, I want 60 ounces a day and I'm just going to go pumping 4 times a day. No, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I did get there eventually, but it doesn't happen anytime soon. So you do have to promote, if you're going to be on that end of it, knowing that you need to help people to manage it if that is their goal to do to their body.
Okay. And so then that was my next question. So you get up to this 50 ounces a day, you never got mastitis. And then what were the efforts that you made to slowly get down to a more manageable pumping schedule? What was that like?
Didn't. Both journeys, I just knew I wanted a long-term pump on this journey. So I pumped, I think around 9 or 10 months, I dropped till I was slowly dropping based on my body down. And so by 9 months, or maybe 10 months, I was around 4 times a day. And I stayed there from 9 months all the way until, because after a year, you can sustain at that point. Like I could give my children other milk, but I didn't have to because I had way more milk because I got myself up high. But I was still well over 30 ounces well after a year because I was able to get higher. So when I dropped, I did it slowly. So I stayed at 4 times a day from around 9 months to 2+ years, 2.5, almost 3 years. And then I slowly kept going down until I'm over 3 years now. I don't pump to sustain for their well-being any longer. I'm still actively trying products and staying lactating for that purpose, but I am now no longer pumping to provide breast milk. And I'm proud of myself. Over 3 years, I get what I get now. They get that, but I'm not like pumping 8, 10 times. Never do 8 anyway, but I'm still not at 8 times a day.
Okay. And do they still really enjoy your milk?
Yes, they love it. They love it. I mix it in with their regular milk now. They do Ripple pea protein milk. So yes.
Okay. So then do you want to just tell the people where they can find you and how to reach you? And now that they know where to go for some pumping help?
Yes, I am Pump with Purpose on, oh my gosh, 8 or 9 social media platforms. So I have Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Peanut, and I'm going to forget the 8th one. I can't even, but I am Pump with Purpose. My website is www.pumpwithpurpose.com if you're interested in premier pumping consults. But yes, I am everywhere that the pumping community is. I want to be a household name. I want to normalize pumping and let the world know that we pump with purpose.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us about your pumping journey.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye.
If this conversation doesn't inspire you to learn more about pumping, if there are gaps in your knowledge, or to give a high five to an exclusive pumper, I don't know what will. Since following Dianna's Pump with Purpose account on Instagram, I have identified my own pumping biases and have changed my language around pumping. And I'm so thankful to other professionals who push me to be better and do better for my clients and the people I reach. Just because pumping was difficult for me 9 and 5 years ago, before I knew as much as I know now about pumping, when I wasn't properly sized and when there were way fewer pump options and when I was given very little direction about pumping at all, does not mean that every pumper has to hate pumping. Now, when someone asks me about exclusive pumping as their first option, I don't tell them it's harder than nursing. It takes more time or more work. I tell them they can do that with the right help and the right tools. And I, of course, share my favorite exclusive pumping accounts on Instagram, like Pump with Purpose. All of Dianna's info is linked in the show notes. Be sure to follow her. And if you are an exclusive pumper and would like a premier pumping consult, go to her linked website. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and for sharing it with a friend. Bye.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Do you know what pumping does?
Yep, it gives your baby milk.
How does it give your baby milk? What does the pump do? Does it take the milk out of your body?
It takes the milk out and into the baby's mouth.
Into the baby's mouth? Into a bottle, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So they're still feeding with their body, but they're just giving that milk to the baby with a bottle, right? What do you think of that idea?
Good, but bad.
Oh, why?
Because I heard of some people that want and that can do milk, but can't. That doesn't want to do milk, so do bottle.
Oh. And what do you think about that?
Bad.
Oh, why?
Should be using the milk shape from the body.
Oh. But what if a person needs to work and they can't take their baby with them?
Cow's milk.
So you think it would be better to give cow's milk than mommy milk in a bottle?
No, mommy milk is better.
Yeah.
But you can't because the milk to the baby eating cow's milk.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think those babies like all that mommy milk?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think babies like mommy milk from the body and mommy milk from a bottle?
Maybe and maybe not.
Yeah, it probably depends on the baby, right? Some babies prefer the body, and you know what?
No?
Some babies actually prefer the bottle. Isn't that funny?
Even when but what if the bottle is too big?
Yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes the bottle is too big and that happens, and then we have to learn how to adjust for that baby. But sometimes babies have difficulty drinking straight from the body, and sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't know why. But that way, those babies can get all that yummy mommy milk, even if they're not drinking from the body. I think that's great.
Me too.
Awesome. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for telling me.